Okay. Little late. Said we had problems connecting until about 11 after. Gonna go ahead and start this recording. Wait just a couple seconds, see if my preview takes effect. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we're effectively on. Cool. And that window is broken. Here we go. Alright, so sorry for anybody that was waiting for very long. YouTube decided it didn't want to connect to its own services, which was great. Let's go ahead and start the thing. Tonight was just going to be something really chill and relaxed. Just going to look at a few things. So, we're going to go ahead and start with some, just looking at our thing here, and as we looked, we've gotten through our movement states pretty good. We have all of these created, not necessarily implemented, but they're all created. And we have break, jump, and wheel rotation, which we haven't done yet. And we're going to make all those velocity based. So we have lighting, and then eventually later we'll look at the lighting. So we'll get into the art part with some lighting, ramps, and other things. And then we have race progress. So stream times are still going to move forward with the same times in mind, 6 and 10. So 6 o'clock Tuesday, Thursday, and then 10 a.m. Saturday. Saturday might start to be a art stream, so this will be more art based. I'll start doing some drawings, and then we'll move into doing some basic type assets and pulling those into Unity and what we need to do when we go to do those. So, and remember, if you're finding these helpful and want to follow along, please remember to subscribe so you get all the posts and notifications. With that, I'm just going to run one more post here. Just for anyone that left and might want to come back if they see that post. So we check the system triggers. We're just going to go back and clean up the code that we've already been working on for a while. So let's turn this on to our code screen. And code screen, there's one typo here I found, racer input bidge. So let's just do a whole rename here to make sure it replaces everywhere in our code. The bridge, and then enter so that saves. Rename them all bridge. Wait for this to load for a while, because we did reference that a few different places here. So now that's done. I know we needed to check out our accelerate class. Which is, so if we use this little drop down here, we can actually drop down and see everything in our project so that we have open. Accelerate script is right there. So we open accelerate. Unless we had this just takes in the left and right value currently. So whatever that input is what it'll be. But we might want to change how much they turn accordingly. So if we want to change how much a state can turn when it's in that state, so while we're accelerating constantly forward. If we want to be able to change our turn direction and have a different turn amount while we are in, for example, accelerate, idle, stun, and any other state that we'd want to add later, we might want to put something in here to add to this so that we're not stuck with the one value that's getting passed through. And we could either do that here or in racers. Okay, that one's okay. Like position. Those were some other classes I was working on beforehand that aren't necessarily part of this project. So we can either add them in the move context, racer move context, or we can add them in the input bridge. Since our racer move context already has this whole set of project references here, we might want to do that somewhere else and set that up in a different way. So maybe we should put that in our input bridge. So we just go to vars, and I'm going to put new region. And then this region is going to contain our steer amount. So steering parameters, and then under steering parameters, we want to end our region. And if we end that region, what's left in it? Pull that down here. We have steering parameters, end region, and we'll create a new set of values, but those values we don't want to adjust in the input bridge. We want to actually adjust that via parameter. So what we'll do is we'll head over to our Unity. And in our Unity, we'll be looking at how we can possibly use our new parameters. So go back to scripts. So assets, scripts, and we'll create some SEO parameters. And we'll create an SEO. So inside SEOs, we'll right click, create C# script, and we'll want to be having this or what's in here actually? Move state SEO. Probably be better to save it in here. So let's open move state. Editing move state, we have move state SEO. Turn that camera quick. So on move state SEO, we could add some more fields in here. So let's go ahead and Control C. And paste. And this isn't going to be max speed. This is going to be our turn speed. And if we have turn speed, we have 10. This will be fine for this case. So we'll just be able to adjust our turn speed in the inspector in the param objects. And we'll look at that again when we get there. then to make this work, so now if we go into our accelerate, we can change our accelerate to use the move context, and where we add our force that we created in our last video, we have player body forward accelerate acceleration by force mode dot force. We want actually the rotate racer, and where we have a movedir, we want a movedir dot x by the ARMC, by that ARMC dot accelerate SCO, which is our SCO object that holds that accelerate class. And we want to access the turn. It looks like I made it private instead of public. So let's just go back and make sure. We did make it protected, which means we just need to make a quick accessor for it. So we do a public float turn speed getting return of turn speed. And then we'll go to accelerate and put turn speed in. So we have accelerate SCO.turn speed, and then we should see a difference in our behavior. So we'll look at where that was set up in parameters first. So we'll switch back to our Unity after we save everything. And in our Unity, then we'll look at our I need to go back to the original scene. So open sample scene, and we'll see this. And then assets, we need materials, racer, scenes, scripts. So we'll need our scripts, our SEO parameters, and our parameter instances. Just change our accelerate, and you'll see it didn't come up in the inspector. Did it move state? Did it manage to add it to it or not? Okay, so I can't find it in my inspector, so I need to go to racer, move, state SCO. Right, that file didn't save. So we save that file and wait for the Unity to update. Didn't seem to worry too much about it. Let's deal with our console. This is repeat. So let's go to projects. That's just duplicated from the one test, so let's get rid of that. And then let's wait for it to finish compiling. Okay, now we should go console. Should be no warnings. It's just joystick disconnected warning, which we don't have one attached, so that's probably why it's running that. Okay. What broke? Not set to an instance of an object. Move eraser, not move context. What happened? Eraser move context, eraser input. This should be bridge. Right? Why broken? It looks like my file was damaged somehow. Okay. Let's open up our thing a little bit more, get a full look at what's wrong with it. So this body is connected to that. Player input bridge. What happened to our... Okay. Well, we'll just have to reset that up. Go to Racer Con, do some... Okay, so if we add these, drag the Racer input into it, and then get some input bridge running, we have cancel invoke, cancel, stop all coroutines. Racer input. What's in the... I put this in the wrong field. Okay. Move callback. Not sure what broke it. It might be the way I connected the GitHub, but it might just be difficult. Alright, so get those set up with our move input and eraser start methods. That should all work. All these references are here. Not sure what it lost that for, but okay. It's very slippery now for some reason. Let's start it again. Okay, so when I hit H, it switches into the accelerate state. Whoa, and you can see that turn speed is a lot higher now. So then all we have to do to adjust the turn speed is go back to our project, our scriptable objects, and go to params, jig param. Why is it moving so much faster? Because we didn't quite connect that yet, did we? Mod behavior, camera behavior. So that would have been in the... Yes, because we went just through the accelerate. So we need to open the accelerate one in the inspector, and we can see that turn speed. That turn speed felt a little fast. Let's pull it down to like 3. 3 and some. Alright. And then we have left and right, we have back. And then we have H. And then we have just a little bit better turning. A little more control on it. You can see it turn on a dime pretty close. Alright, so that's working better. What were some of the other things we needed to clean up? So now our acceleration works in that way. Our idle is set up this way just kind of for testing purposes. So what's in move player? We just defined it. I actually just don't want idle to do anything. You can have him move around the thing a little bit, try and get into position for starting while he's behind the starting line, but I'm just gonna leave that empty. And the reason I'm leaving it empty is because I need to override and make sure it rewrites idle so that it doesn't move forward at a speed. Okay, so there's that one. So now idle won't move. It'll just sit in idle before race. And then accelerate, well, once it's told to accelerate, start moving forward and start doing the grinding, or accelerating. So what do we do from here? From here, we're just going to look at, make sure everything's in order. So all of our states are here. We can either start on a new state, or we can start on something new. I'm going to start on something new just so that we get these a little broken up, these videos broken up a little more. I'm thinking what would be a good one to do is actually to go through and start a game manager so that we kind of get a feel for how that goes. I like to do them really simple. I like to do it so that it's a singleton, and a lot of people do singletons in different ways in Unity. I've seen some people do it so that it sets itself on awake, some on enable. Some of them are strictly through C# and are kind of static, which is the one I'm going to use, because if you use it as a, I'm not going to use it as a static, but I'll use it as a C# class and not a mono behavior. I'm just going to use it as a regular C# class. And the reason for that is I can still share all the mono behavior data that can still go through there, like references and that, but I don't have to worry about it keeping too much information, and I can make it persistent if I want to make it an object. If I want to make it a game object, but I don't have to make it persistent. If I don't store that reference in a persistent object, it won't carry through the scenes. If you did want one that would carry through the scenes, which if we're going to put in a Grand Prix mode would probably be pretty good, something where you run consecutive races, one after the other, then we would use a game object. So maybe that would be best. We can go and do a script. So assets, scripts, and we can make some folder, and we'll do this for we'll just call this our game management folder. Game management folder is going to have everything from actually managing our game. So let's go to game management and let's create a C# script. And first step, we need to decide how this works for game manager. So if we're doing if we're gonna have a Grand Prix mode, it's probably best to have a persistent game manager that can go through for each one, and then have another race manager that manages a certain race and counts the laps, handles that sort of thing. That's specific to the scene, and then on load, it sends it to the game manager. So let's go ahead and say, let's go ahead and call this a game manager. With that game manager, what do I want to do? I want to add another one in here. And call this a race manager. Um, and this is kind of the way I would go about setting up most things that would be overarching and persistent, such as a fighting game has rounds, platformer might have stages, but then the overarching game manager says this is how the core function of the game runs. We could even make it more specialized of a script like Grand Prix. So then the game manager would take you to the set of a game mode, which might be another one. It's good to C# script. Game mode. We can kind of explore what those kinds of things would have. So I'm going to open all three of these. And then I'm going to switch the window over so people can see the code. And so what does this look like? Just going to go ahead again, go ahead and date it. .24. And then we have our template that they set us up with that we will delete. We have vars. We have methods. We have accessors. And what do we have from that? Vars, methods, accessors. That's pretty much what we all need for that. Then I'm just going to go through my scripts and do that. I'll copy this chunk. And just overwrite everything, because there's nothing better to program in sometimes than a blank slate. So we have these all set up. Race manager, all the game modes. First up, game manager. Game manager would probably be a persistent object. So persistent objects can be mounted behavior. And what I would do is I'd set up a simple singleton on that one, which I just found a new way I like to do that one, which it creates a, I don't want to do protected. Singletons I always use private. It's one of the few times I do use private variables. So private game manager, it's a type of itself. And this is actually a static private game manager. instance, then we don't give it a value right away. Come in here to accessor and we go static private or static public game manager instance, and this is going to be a get only, and we're not just going to return an instance. So get, inside this get, if instance is equal to null. If our instance is equal to null, what do I do here? Then, and I just use brackets to make it easier for me to see, then we have instance is equal to new, and that new thing is going to be a new game manager type. With parameters of nothing. So why do I create a new game manager here instead of up here? And why do I make it private here with an accessor that creates one if there isn't one? It's so that the constructor, we'll add that in, constructor, which is what creates the object, can be private, and so no other object can make one of these classes. It has an interesting effect in Unity that I've seen. So private game manager. In the case where it doesn't make it so you can't add this as a component, because this is a public class game manager, you can still add this as a component, but you can't create, what was it? Okay, save that up and test it actually. So what does the code as it is right now say? Let's switch back to our Unity and see what it currently does. So you create an empty game object, then you add a component, game manager, right? So even though it's private, a private constructor, you can still add it as a game component due to the properties of mono behavior, class that it inherits from. Well, that's good. Now we have a private game manager. So if we go back to our code, I would use this one as my C# class. So if I was to remove mono behavior and not put it on a game object, I would use this. I would use this style of format. If I want, however, to make it persistent like we're going to, whoops, now I have to wait for it to save. I don't make this private, and I don't use a constructor. instance. So if instance is null, it doesn't equal new game object, it equals this game object, or this script, game manager. This was a little bit of a different code. Okay, so we have instance equal null, instance equal this, return instance. So instead of doing the C# with this without mono behavior, I want to go ahead and use an object because I want it to be persistent if it's a game manager. So I still want that private static instance. I still want it to return instance. What is it? There we go. So I still want it to return instance. What happens up here is I go to I go to methods, and instead of in a get, we're just going to play around with this for a little bit. So if we set what happens? We have if let's get autocomplete so that we spell stuff correctly. Instance, not capital. If instance is null, then we want to create that. Something's wrong with my brackets, so we'll have to fix that in a minute. But if instance is set to null, then instance is equal to value. And then we underline. And what if instance is not set to value? So then we else. So else we destroy the game object. So destroy game object. Lowercase game object. So if instance is equal null, instance equals a value. Else destroy game object. Because this will be called on the game object. No. We get rid of static. But we can't return instance unless we are a static object. Where we can't destroy an object unless we're a non-static class. Which means I'd probably need to look up reference for how I did this if I was going to try and show you this. It's not quite something that I can just pull together off the top of my head. So something a little simpler, since I don't quite remember that supposedly really simple way. We have a static private game manager. So this is static, meaning this one variable exists across this class. So we have an instance of a game manager that is to this class. So if we go game manager.instance, we get the instance. We want to set the instance on enable. On enable. Because if we do it on the awake, that only works on the awake of the scene, start on the start, and enable when the object specifically gets enabled. So we do private on enable. If instance. So if instance is null, let's try writing the code and then moving it around to where we can move it to. If instance is null, instance equals new game manager. Instance is equal to this. So on enable, if instance is equal to null, then instance equals this. Else we destroy. Okay, that's not supposed to have that. That's supposed to have that. Destroy game object. Lowercase game object meaning the game object that this script is attached to. And this is what I was trying to think of. Here we have a game manager amount of behavior that has a static private game manager instance reference. private void on enable. So a private method to this specific class, not callable outside, but callable by Unity. We have if the instance is equal to null, it sets the instance to this object, and we else destroy the game object that is associated with the non-static instance. Um, so being that instance, so the next thing we would have to ask is just double checking our logic here, instance equal null. So that's a pointer. And if that pointer is empty, or is null, not empty, then this will run. But what happens if that reference is not null but doesn't exist? I mean, what if it is null? Yeah, what if it's not null but does not exist? Well, that should still work, because Unity would return a false null, because it no longer exists. So it's an unfound object with a null reference exception. Any rate, instance. We want to go with an instance, and we want to add a new piece of code here. Do not destroy unload. We pass in this game object. So now this class will be linked to this, and it will not destroy unload. Great. So instance equals this and do not destroy unload, meaning it won't be destroyed on load when the scene ends. The only one thing this is missing is that it has to be on an object in the scene that's created not through code. But overall, that's pretty useful. There is one change to make it do that, but I won't be showing that today. We need to get some other parts running, especially since that 10-minute delay, or that nearly 15-minute recovery it took me to do. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our Unity scene. I'm going to go and edit this. So we got a creature. So we have a mono behavior, and it's going to be our game manager. Game manager. And it's going to add a component of our game manager script. So we have all of this to play with, which doesn't actually have any information for us to add to it, but we'll get there. So the next thing we want to go to is go and just think about our next step here. So we have a game mode. Game manager is going to exist all the time. Game mode is going to exist when we select a mode. then race manager is going to exist only in race scenes. Okay, then race manager is going to have to get information from game manager. So how does race manager do that? Let's open race manager and check that out. Going to need to go to the code page, and code page we have our vars in here. So we have our vars. I'm not actually going to store a variable for the reference in this one. So methods, let's say on enable for this one. This one also needs to be a singleton. Not quite in the same way that this needs to be this way. It needs to be the only one, but if instance equal null, we only need the else destroy. Wait a second. Is it this? Static. That's static. This is going to be game manager instance. Not a method. Get return instance. Okay. Okay. So if your instance is null, we still want to do this and make it do not destroy on load, else do destroy the game object. Okay. We still want to do that. Problem is we want to do it in sets. Okay, let's get a line open, a line open, a line open. Just make sure our tabbing's all happy. Okay. So if the instance is null, instance equals this. No, instance equals value. Okay, scrap this. Scrap this entirely. Okay. My head's not wrapping around this. We're just gonna look at race. We're just gonna use race manager right now. We're gonna not. This pattern's not important to what I'm trying to do right now anyway, so let's just get rid of it. let's just use the race manager mono behavior. So we can kind of get our behavior of our race started to play, and then we'll worry about making this pattern when I've had time to find it in my other project. This just ain't gonna work today. I need Unity to open, so let's rename this. Rename this our race manager. Race manager is gonna go to add component. We want a race manager. So what does this do? This manages one round of a race. Alright. And what do I need out of this? So I need this to do a certain thing for me. I need to go ahead and alter this. So we go to bars, and I'll show my code here. Race manager, I'm just going to create a simple method. Using the on enable. So private void on enable. I'm just going to use all built-ins because I'm not having very good luck writing code right now. We're just going to use private void on enable. So once this becomes enabled, we game manager would have players. Race input would have race manager would theoretically get it from game managers instead of getting all the players that are racing. So maybe we should do that part. Just change game manager to methods. So if we get methods running, we want just a simple get all players. We would just want get all the players. Hi. Okay. So if I just want to get all the players, the easy way to do that is on enable. It's got to run before the player body one dot, not the player body. It used to run before the race manager does. So we're going to use on awake for right now. We're going to use on awake to simply autocomplete's not working either. Technology is completely against me today. On. It's just awake. Private would awake. We just need to get all the players. And what are we getting from them? We need a type that we can find. Well, if we go in or find a race remove context, we can go by that. And the rigid body works fine that way. We just have that container that's floating up doing nothing. But we don't have to move it by the container. It should probably be something that is on the player object itself. So let's go ahead and grab that. Let's say by move context. And let's go by move context then. Let's do an array of race remove context. So we do a protected array of race remove context and that race remove context can be brackets race remove context with an S. Do we want it to equal null? We don't. Do we want it to equal a new? Okay, so array must be declared at size, which is the issue, but in the awake we can just set it to be something. So I don't want it equal to null. I just kind of want it to be empty. So let's define the array. Race remove context index of length 0. Yes, 0 items in the array, but the array does exist. So we have private void on awake. We need race remove context is equal to find object find objects of type race remove context. Alright, so find objects of type. There's object and there's objects. So if we want to find more than one, we use objects, and we have our method, and this time we have a type that we're identifying that is race remove context. So we know that race remove context exists on our racer body, so we can use this right now to create a list of contexts and access those objects to manipulate them for the start of the race. So game manager, and then we go to the race manager. So simply put, on enable the part we put on the input bridge. We want to get that. And right now we're just going to use a serialized field so I don't have to deal with static variables. Serialized field. Because this is just for game manager testing and game manager. Let's not use that underscore crap. Game manager, that's not the way I want that to be. And actually I'm just going to get rid of the manager part. We're just going to call it GM. So we have the GM, and that's equal to nothing right now. And then we have the private void on enable. And in there we're going to take our GM and we're just going to use a for for each object, which is going to be a RMC. So it's race remove context for each RMC in GM dot, and then we need an accessor and a racer game manager. Accessors, we need race remove context to be down here. So we need public race remove context brackets, and we're just gonna have to call this one RMC because I don't want it to be the same as I guess we'll use this. Copy paste that and just change capital R. So let's get return race remove context. So just do a simple get, go here, race remove context. And then for each one of those, we just want to tell our player input to start. And you'll remember in our racer input bridge, that one event takes a context in. So we open our racer input bridge. Now we want to start the race. Because racer start, we change the action to accelerate. Takes in an input action callback.context. Okay. Well, we're not going to have this. This was so we could set it up for testing with our input. So what I'm going to actually do is just Control C. And make another copy of that. And just take out the requirement for an input action. So, yeah. Now, in fact, now we can use this method in Race Manager. But before we can do that, we have to go to Race Remove Context. So this would be RMC. So we got RMC dot game object dot. We get the RMCs game objects. And we might even not need the game object. RMC dot get component, and we don't want race remove context. We want a racer input bridge. Just part of the reason I built this up. I don't want everything talking directly to the move context. I don't want everything getting the move context. We just kind of use this. Actually, it might make more sense to change this to be. Yeah, it would make more sense to do it this way and use racer input bridge as the type. So let's go ahead and change that, because that is a very bad idea to use the context. Then let's just, yeah, let's just set that up. Eraser input bridge. There we go. Just quickly redo that. Eraser input bridge. Okay. Then we don't need this get component anymore. And rib. ngm.eraser bridges. So for each rib, eraser start. Alright, there it is. We can do a Control-Shift-S, save everything. And what do we have here? So I'm just setting up some of this. So we have our eraser start, and we have our game manager. With our game manager, what is the thing I want to do? I want to go ahead and go back to Unity. Now that everything's saved up, I want to go and I want to create another empty game object. Call this game manager. Game manager. We're just kind of doing some testing, scaling, and or testing our actions right now. We need a race manager that has a game. We need to add a game manager here. Game manager. Because game manager will hold reference to all the players, while race manager will run the actual race for this current stage. And then this should all update correctly. Make sure our console is empty. Play. No reference object was not set to an instance of an object. Is that true? Set to that object. Game manager is itself is returning that. Find objects of type. Eraser input bridges. Does this on awake. Game mode. We're not using that. Let's just close it for right now. rib.racer starts. Where does this actually go? This goes to context.accelerate, which we just had an issue with. What if we open the events? This one. Okay, why do we have accelerate, is it because it's calling it on enable? So I don't think this error is coming from, let's test it. Try it again, see if it runs consistently or if it's inconsistent. It's consistent. That might be load time dependent. One thing you want to think about when you're doing game design is making things what a lot of people call order independent. This might be an example of not thinking about order independency necessarily enough. It was meant to be a quick test, that's why it was done this way, but it might not actually be fast enough to do it, or this might be too fast trying to do it this way. So for racer input bridge, if we go into GM racer bridges on enable, well, the enable of the other one may not have run, and that would mean that on enable is where we have all of our racer set up. So I'll go back to my code and show that. So on enable here we have that, and on move state, we have state change, but we also have it's not in state, it's move context, racer move context. Use the drop down arrow, find racer move context. Racer move context has an enable, so on enable we set up our rigid body and our rim. And on top of that we also set up what looks like that should be real. This project references idle. All of accelerate runs through and should be referenced and set up because it's performed not inside any of these on enable setups or anything. Although it could be on enable idle ms is equal to idle. So it could be that it's going to, could be that it's hitting RMS early, and that this on enable hasn't been set, so it's asking for an idle that doesn't exist. So we need to go ahead and make sure that's working. So this isn't going to work as a test even because we need to get rid of, we need to run this later. But what can we do then? There's one called first updates. Potential fixes. First update, that's unused. Okay, that's not considered part of those. Let's try just getting. It's not what I want. Updates. Let's see if we got. We have fixed update, late update. Don't have first update. We could set one up, but let's not do that. Okay. So this doesn't currently work. Okay. I'm gonna look into this and hopefully come back with a solution. If not, you'll notice a switch towards more art streams while I figure out this problem. Because it should be just that I need to set up the game manager and then all that runs downhill from there. But it doesn't. Looks like a lot of these short gap stops are not going to be working. Might even have to use a ready key. I think that would work better. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where we're gonna end it tonight. There was a little bit of trouble in the beginning, and then there's more trouble when I try to do some set up this game manager. We're just gonna probably kill all this code and come back to it fresh in the next, not the next stream. Next stream will be doing some art type stuff. I'll be pulling open my pulling open some illustrations and just getting some confidence with using the pad before I try and teach you guys too much. But we'll look at doing some comic stuff so that we get a few things down with our file saves and our programs before we move on to making different types of assets in mind for games specifically. I'll try and delete this video probably from the thing and just pick up from it fresh on a different one. And then I'll try and set up something else here. But yeah, so sorry this one didn't quite work out right, and all the errors that it wants to throw. We'll revisit this later. If not, we'll just move back to movement for a while until I can figure out what the actual structure for this needs to be. Because again, it's just not quite. There's something about the setup that's just not quite normal to other types of things that I was working on, so I'll look this up. Until then, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll continue with this with the Programming Tuesday with some art stuff starting 10 a.m. on Saturday. With that, I hope everybody has a good night, and we'll see you later. Where's the thing? Come on. This one, here we go.